The tactical team outside 421 Willow Creek Drive had done this 100 times. They knew how it went. You hit the door at 5 a.m., you flash the badges, and the target folds. Fast, clean, done before the neighborhood wakes up. Agent Shawn Collins checked his warrant one last time in the blue-red wash of the cruiser lights behind him. Robert Fields, 421 Willow Creek. He pocketed it without looking twice. They didn't knock. They never knocked. The battering ram was already swinging when the porch light clicked on. The doors opened first. Collins froze mid-step. The man standing in the doorway was not trembling. He was not scrambling for a phone or pressing his back against the wall. He was standing in the frame of his own home. Silver-haired, sharp-eyed, his robe still neat, so his coffee still in his hand. Watching them the way a man watches something he has already decided how to handle. Robert Fields didn't move. He didn't shout. He looked at the ICE insignia on Collins' vest, then slowly raised his eyes to Collins' face. "I count 3 of you," he said, his voice low and impossibly calm. "Before any of you take another step onto my property, I need your names, your badge numbers, and I need to see a judicially signed warrant." He tilted his head slightly. Not an administrative one, a real one. Collins opened his mouth. "Because if that document in your pocket is an I-200, Robert continued, then what you're holding is a form, and a form does not give you the right to enter this home." He took one slow sip of his coffee. "I know this because I spent 25 years deciding exactly that. From the bench of the 9th Circuit Federal Court." The 2 agents behind Collins exchanged a look. Collins didn't move forward, but he didn't step back either. And that was the moment Robert Fields knew this wasn't going to be a simple conversation. Because behind him, down the hallway, he could hear Loretta humming in the kitchen. And he had no idea that one of these men had a hair trigger and shaking hands. He had beaten every argument the law had ever thrown at him. But the law had never shown up at his door with a loaded rifle before. Before we go any further, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. This story's just getting started. Collins made his decision in the space of a single breath. "Sir, get on the ground, now." He stepped onto the porch, one hand dropping to his holster, the other jabbing a finger at the floor like Robert was a dog that had wandered into the wrong yard. The 2 agents behind him fanned out on instinct. Stephanie Fry, moving left toward the porch rail, Henry Nguyen pressing right, his rifle already climbing to his shoulder. Robert Fields did not get on the ground. He took one small step back, not out of fear, Collins would later tell himself, but the step of a man making space to think. And he set his coffee mug on the narrow hallway table beside the door, with the careful precision of someone who intended to pick it up again very soon. "Your name," Robert said. Quiet. Absolute. "I said down." Collins drew his weapon. The barrel was level with Robert's chest, 3 feet of air between them. The porch light threw hard shadows across Collins' face, and in that light, his jaw was tight, and his eyes were the eyes of a man who needed this moment to go a very specific way. Robert looked at the gun the way he had once looked at bad arguments in his courtroom, with the measured patience of a man who had seen worse and was not impressed. "You've drawn your weapon on a retired federal judge standing inside his own home," Robert said. "That's going to be an important detail later. I want to make sure I have your name correct when I write it down." His eyes moved to the badge on Collins' vest and held there, reading. "Collins. Shawn Collins, if I'm reading that right." He shifted his gaze to Frey, then to Nguyen. "And yours?" Nobody answered. I'll get them eventually," Robert said. "Badge numbers too. Last warning." Collins' voice had dropped to something raw. "On the ground, or I will put you there." "You will not." Robert said it the way a man states the weather. "Because the moment you touch me without lawful authority to enter this dwelling, you have committed a federal crime inside the jurisdiction where I spent 2.5 decades handing down sentences for exactly that offense." He paused. "So, I'll ask you one more time, Agent Collins. Let me see the warrant, the judicial warrant, signed by a sitting magistrate." The silence on that porch was a living thing. Nguyen's rifle hadn't dropped. Frey hadn't moved. Collins' weapon was still up, still aimed, his knuckle white against the grip. But his feet hadn't crossed the threshold. Not yet. And somewhere behind Robert, down the long hallway, past the framed photographs and the Persian runner and 25 years of a life carefully built, Loretta's humming stopped. She had heard the voices. She was coming to see what was wrong. Robert heard Loretta's footsteps slow in the hallway behind him. She had stopped just short of the light. Good. He didn't turn around. He couldn't afford to give Collins the distraction. "Close the kitchen door, Loretta." His voice was even, no alarm in it. Just the tone he used when he needed something done without argument. A pause. Then the soft click of a door, pulling shut. Collins' eyes had flicked past Robert's shoulder for just a moment Robert had clocked and cataloged the way he cataloged everything. And now the agent was looking at him again, jaw still tight, weapon still raised. "You want to talk law?" Collins said. "Fine. I have a valid federal warrant for this address." "You have a document," Robert said. "There's a distinction, and it is not a small one." He folded his hands in front of him with the ease of a man settling into a familiar chair. "In 1980, the Supreme Court decided Payton versus New York. Are you familiar with it?" Collins said nothing. "I'll take that as a no." Robert kept his eyes on the barrel of the gun, without appearing to look at it at all. The court held, unanimously, on the core principle that the Fourth Amendment prohibits the warrantless entry of a person's home to make a routine arrest. The home is the last sacred space the Constitution protects. And the warrant you are carrying, Agent Collins, is an I-200, an administrative warrant. It was signed by an immigration officer. He let that land. Not a judge, not a magistrate, an officer. Which means it authorizes you to detain a person if you encounter them in a public space. It does not, under any reading of federal law, authorize you to cross that threshold. We have reason to believe. You have a list, Robert said, and a time pressure, and I suspect a quota. None of those things are enumerated in the Fourth Amendment. He tilted his head slightly toward Nguyen, whose rifle was still up. "Son, I need you to think very carefully about what you're doing. Because right now, every second you stand on that porch with that weapon aimed at a private citizen inside his own home, you are building a federal civil rights case. Against yourself." Nguyen's eyes moved to Collins. Collins didn't give him anything back. The gun was still up, but Collins hadn't moved forward, and the threshold of the door sat between them like a line drawn in something older and heavier than paint. Like it had been drawn in a courtroom 40 years ago by 9 people in black robes who understood exactly what a door means. Robert waited. He was good at waiting. He had spent 25 years waiting for people to realize they had already lost. The question was whether Collins would figure it out before somebody did something that couldn't be undone. Did you know? An ICE administrative warrant, Form I-200, does not give agents the legal right to enter your home. Only a warrant signed by a federal judge or magistrate does. The Supreme Court established this in Payton versus New York, 1980. If you were standing at that door right now, would you open it? Drop your answer in the comments. Collins lowered his weapon by 2 inches. Not all the way. Just enough to suggest he was thinking. That was when Robert knew the man was in trouble. A confident agent doesn't adjust. A confident agent either advances or retreats. The 2-inch drop was the movement of a man doing arithmetic in his head. Counting costs, weighing options, trying to find a version of this moment that still worked in his favor. Robert had watched that exact calculation happen on the faces of attorneys, defendants, and witnesses for a quarter century. It never ended well for the person doing the math. "Collins." The voice came from behind the agent's left shoulder. "Frey." She had moved off the porch rail, and her tone had the clipped impatience of someone who had been patient long enough. "We drove 40 minutes, and we are not leaving empty." Collins didn't look at her, but his jaw tightened. "The number is the number," Nguyen said from the right. Quieter, almost to himself. "Spady's going to want to know why we burned a full team deployment on a 0. There it was. Robert watched Collins' face and saw the shape of it clearly now. The whole sorry architecture of the man's desperation. This wasn't about Robert. It had never been about Robert. It was about a spreadsheet somewhere in a regional office, a column of numbers that needed to grow before the end of the month, and a supervisor named Spady who had made it very clear what happened to agents whose columns stayed flat. Collins was not a villain. He was a man trying not to drown, who had decided Robert was something he could stand on. "You drove 40 minutes, Robert said, "to a wrong address, with a form that does not constitute lawful authority to enter, because someone in your chain of command is counting arrests the way a car dealership counts sales." He kept his voice without contempt. Just the flat, factual register of a man describing weather. And now, Agent Frey and Agent Nguyen are standing on my porch suggesting that the solution to an administrative error is to compound it with a constitutional violation. He paused. "I want you to hear yourself, Collins. I want you to actually listen to what is being proposed here." The porch was quiet. A dog barked somewhere down the street. The cruiser lights still pulsed blue and red against the siding of the house, painting everything in slow, alternating color. "I have done nothing," Robert said. "I am a 63-year-old man standing in his own home on a Sunday morning. Whatever number you need, I am not it." Collins finally lowered the weapon all the way, but he didn't holster it. And Frey was still on the porch, and Nguyen's rifle was still up, and Robert could hear the quiet in the kitchen behind him. The specific quality of silence that meant Loretta was listening at the door. She had always been too curious for her own good. "Show me the warrant," Robert said. Collins blinked. "What?" "The document in your pocket. Hold it up." Robert's voice hadn't changed in register or temperature. "You've been standing on my porch for 4 minutes claiming lawful authority. I'd like to see the paperwork that supports that claim." Collins hesitated. The hesitation of a man who had been so focused on Robert's face that he had not looked at the warrant again since the parking lot 40 minutes ago. He reached into his vest pocket slowly, unfolded the single sheet, and held it forward at arm's length the way people hold things they don't entirely want to be associated with. Robert didn't reach for it. He leaned forward by an inch and read. The silence stretched. Then something shifted in Robert's face. Not triumph, not relief. I think something quieter and more devastating than either. The expression of a man who has just confirmed the thing he already suspected. "West Willow Creek," Robert said. Collins' eyes dropped to the paper. "Your warrant," Robert continued, "is for 421 West Willow Creek Avenue. That address is 11 blocks north of here." He straightened. "You are standing on the porch of 421 Willow Creek Drive. There is no west in my address. There has never been a west in my address." He gestured toward the brass numbers mounted beside his front door. "I have lived at this address for 19 years. Whoever typed that warrant transposed a street name, and nobody in your chain of command, not your supervisor, not the officer who signed the I-200, not the team lead who approved the deployment. Nobody caught it." Collins stared at the paper. The color had drained from the parts of his face not covered by his tactical gear. "A clerical error," Robert said. "One word. And because of it, a tactical team drove 40 minutes in the dark and drew weapons on a private citizen in his own home." He let that sit for a moment, the way he used to let a closing argument sit before the jury. "This is not an isolated failure, Agent Collins. Wrong door raids happen dozens of times a year across this country. Families pulled from beds, children in handcuffs, elderly people on the floor at gunpoint. Almost always traceable back to a data entry error, a stale database, an address that was never verified by anyone who had actual skin in the outcome." He paused. "Because the consequences land on the person behind the door, not the person at the keyboard." Frey said nothing. Nguyen said nothing. Collins slowly folded the warrant. His hands, Robert noticed, were not entirely steady. "You need to leave," Robert said. Simply. Finally. Like a verdict being read. Collins didn't move, but something behind his eyes had already started to collapse. The specific expression of a man watching the story he planned to tell his supervisor dissolve in real time. Studies show that wrong door raids are frequently caused by clerical errors, stale data, or unverified addresses. And the people who pay the price are almost never the ones who made the mistake. Have you ever been held responsible for someone else's error? drop your story below and stay with us. Because Collins still hasn't moved. The kitchen door opened. Robert heard it before he saw it. The soft protest of hinges he had been meaning to oil for 3 months. And in the quarter second before he could turn his head, he understood with perfect clarity that everything he had carefully managed for the last 8 minutes was about to become significantly harder. Loretta stepped into the hallway. She was still in her Sunday morning clothes, reading glasses pushed up into her hair, the small gold cross she never took off, catching the light from the porch. She had a dish towel in her hand. She had come to see what was happening to her husband. It was exactly the thing she would do. It was exactly the thing Robert had been praying she wouldn't. Robert. Her voice was barely a word before she registered the figures on the porch. The tactical vests, the helmets, the rifles. Her eyes moved from face to face and landed on the barrel of Collins' weapon, and she stopped walking the way people stop it when the ground disappears in front of them. Nguyen moved first. He pivoted hard off the right post, came up 2 steps onto the porch threshold, and brought his rifle level with Loretta's chest in a single motion that had the terrible efficiency of something trained into muscle memory. Don't move. Hands. Let me see your hands. The dish towel fell. She lives here. Robert's voice came out with a force he hadn't used in years, not loud but dense, the way a gavel sounds in a stone room. He put himself half a step to his left, partially between Loretta and the barrel. She is my wife. She has lived in this house for 19 years. Lower that weapon right now. Sir, you step back. You will not point that at her. Robert's eyes were on Nguyen, but he was aware of everything. Collins behind Nguyen's shoulder, Frey somewhere on the left, Loretta behind him breathing in shallow pulls that he recognized as the sound of someone trying very hard not to cry. She is a civilian. She is not named on your warrant. She is not a subject of your operation. She walked out of her own kitchen in her own home on a Sunday morning, and you have a rifle on her chest. His voice didn't rise. It dropped. Lower it. Nguyen looked at Collins. Collins looked at the warrant still folded in his fist. Then at Loretta. Then at Robert's face, at the absolute, airless stillness behind Robert's eyes. The look of a man who has reached the place past anger where everything becomes very simple and very cold. Nguyen, Collins said quietly. Come back. Nguyen didn't lower the rifle. Not fully. He took 1 step back off the threshold and let the barrel drop to a 45-degree angle. Still ready, still aimed at the hallway, still aimed at Loretta. Robert reached back without looking and found her hand. It was shaking. His was not. But his heart was doing something it hadn't done since the last time a verdict came back wrong. Hammering against the inside of his ribs with a blind, animal urgency that no amount of legal knowledge had ever taught him how to silence. Robert squeezed Loretta's hand once. Firm, deliberate, the private language of 19 years. And let it go. He needed both hands for this. Collins, he said, turning back to the porch with the measured unhurry of a man changing subjects in a deposition. I want to be fair to you. I understand you believe you had valid authority when you came to this door. I want to give you the opportunity to demonstrate that. He paused. Hold the warrant up again. Face it forward. I want to document what you brought to my home tonight. Collins frowned. I'm not. You came here claiming legal authority. Robert's voice was reasonable. Patient. The voice of a man explaining something to someone he was giving every benefit of the doubt. If the warrant is legitimate, documenting it protects you as much as it protects me. It establishes the record. Any judge reviewing this incident will want to know exactly what document authorized this entry. He gestured toward the wall beside the front door, a casual, open gesture, the kind that drew the eye without appearing to. Hold it up. Let me see it clearly. Collins looked at the warrant, then at Robert. Then, without entirely meaning to, his gaze drifted toward the wall Robert had gestured at, toward the small brushed nickel housing mounted at the top corner of the door frame that he had not noticed when they had approached in the dark. The tiny red indicator light had been blinking the entire time. Collins's face changed. You've been recording? He said. It wasn't a question. I have a security system. Robert said simply. It records continuously. Has for 11 years. The camera covers the full porch, the entry, and approximately 12 feet into the hallway. He let that settle before continuing. Which means it has recorded Agent Nguyen crossing my threshold without lawful authority. It has recorded a rifle aimed at my wife inside our home. And it has recorded... He nodded toward the warrant in Collins' hand. Every second that document has been in frame. His voice didn't carry satisfaction. Just fact. The way a coroner delivers cause of death. But if you'd like to hold it up properly so the timestamp and the address line are legible, I think that would be useful for everyone. Nobody moved. The red light blinked on. Collins slowly lowered the warrant to his side. Frey muttered something under her breath that Robert didn't catch and didn't need to. He could read the room. He had been reading rooms since before any of these agents had entered the academy. What he had now was a record. Time-stamped, continuous, stored to a server he hadn't told them about. Whatever happened next, whatever story got filed in whatever office report Collins drafted at whatever hour of the morning, there was now a version of events that couldn't be edited. The truth had a home. Whether it would be enough was still a question he didn't have the answer to. In most U.S. states, you have the legal right to record law enforcement and federal agents inside your own home. Video evidence has been the single most decisive factor in civil rights cases over the last decade. Because, unlike memory, it doesn't change its story. Robert reached into the pocket of his robe. Collins tensed. Frey's hand moved. Phone, Robert said flatly, holding it up between two fingers before anyone could make a decision they couldn't walk back from. He turned it face out so they could all see the screen. I'm making a call. You are welcome to listen. He found the number without looking. He had dialed it maybe a dozen times in 15 years. Birthdays, a retirement party, the funeral of a mutual colleague 3 winters ago. He pressed call and raised the phone to his ear and waited, watching Collins watch him. It rang 4 times. Then, Fields. The voice on the other end was rough with sleep, but sharpened fast. The reflex of a man who had spent 30 years conditioning himself to be alert the moment a phone rang before sunrise. What time is it? Early, Robert said. I apologize for that, Marcus. I have a situation at my front door, and I believe you're the appropriate person to be aware of it. He kept his eyes on Collins as he spoke. I have a 3-person ICE tactical team on my porch. They arrived approximately 12 minutes ago with an administrative warrant for a different address. They have drawn weapons inside my home. My wife has had a rifle aimed at her chest. He paused 1 beat. I have it on camera. The silence on the other end lasted exactly 2 seconds. Give me the name of the lead agent. Robert lowered the phone slightly. Your name, for the precinct commander. Collins had gone very still. Who is? Commander Marcus Webb, Robert said. 31 years with Metro, and he ran the security detail for the 9th Circuit building for 6 of the years I sat on the bench. He raised the phone again. Agent Shawn Collins, Collins. He heard Marcus exhale, not in frustration, but in the particular way of a man measuring the weight of what he was about to do. Put him on. Robert held the phone out toward Collins. Collins looked at it the way a man looks at a subpoena. He took it, raised it to his ear, said his name once, then said nothing for a long time while the color continued its slow departure from his face. Yes, sir, Collins said finally. Then, understood. Then he handed the phone back without meeting Robert's eyes. Frey was watching Collins. Nguyen was watching the floor. Robert put the phone back to his ear. Marcus, I've got a car 2 minutes out, Webb said. Don't let them leave. I have them on camera. I know you do. A pause, and in it, something that, in another context, might have been the beginning of a tired laugh. You always did run the tightest courtroom in the building, Robert. The line clicked quiet. Robert lowered the phone. On the porch, Shawn Collins was a man standing inside the wreckage of a decision he had made at 5 in the morning, and the sirens that were now faintly audible somewhere to the north were coming for him, not for Robert. The power in that hallway had not shifted loudly. It had simply finished moving, like water finding its level, inevitable and quiet and complete. But Stephanie Fry's hand was still resting on her rifle, and she didn't look like a woman who was ready to accept that it was over. Collins put his weapon in its holster. It was a small motion, barely 4 seconds. But on that porch, it landed like a ruling. The kind that ends arguments and empties courtrooms and leaves everyone standing in the sudden quiet of a thing being decided. Nguyen read it immediately and lowered his rifle to his side. Old training. Follow the lead agent. Don't think. Move. Frey didn't move. Pack it up, Collins said. He wasn't looking at Robert anymore. He was looking at the middle distance, the way men look when they are already somewhere else. Already in the car, already at the office, already sitting across from a supervisor whose expression they are bracing for. We came out here for nothing, Frey said. Her voice had a tightness to it that had been building since the porch rail, since the moment Robert had cited a Supreme Court case and Collins had failed to answer it. We drove out here, we deployed a full team, and we're just going to... Stephanie. Collins' voice was flat, exhausted. Pack it up. The camera, the phone call, all of it, that's his word against... It's not his word. Collins finally looked at her. It's his camera. It's a time-stamped recording on an off-site server. It's the precinct commander 2 minutes away, and it's a warrant with the wrong street name. He said it slowly, each piece placed down like something heavy. It is not his word against ours. It is everything against us. He held her gaze for 1 more second. We're done here. Something moved through Frey's face. Frustration collapsing into something rawer, younger. The expression of someone who had built a version of this night in her head and was watching it refused to become real. Her hand was still on her rifle. Her jaw was still set. Robert watched her the way he had watched 100 witnesses on the edge of saying the thing that would destroy them. He kept his voice low and completely even. Agent Frey? She looked at him, startled almost that he was addressing her directly. You have done nothing tonight that cannot still be walked back. The camera has your presence. It does not yet have a reason to remember you specifically. He held her eyes. Walk off this porch. That is the only decision you have left that works in your favor. The sirens were closer now. Frey's hand came off the rifle. She stepped back, then off the porch, then down the front path without another word, her footsteps hard and fast on the concrete. The sound of someone outpacing something they didn't want to look at directly. Nguyen followed without being asked. Collins stood on the porch alone for 1 moment. The warrant still folded in his fist, the red camera light still blinking above his head. And then he too turned and walked into the dark. Robert stood in his doorway and watched them go. The cruiser lights were still painting the siding blue and red. The neighborhood was beginning to stir. A porch light down the block, a curtain moving, the distant percussion of Marcus Webb's car rounding the far corner. He had stayed calm. He had done everything right. He had been, in every measurable sense, exactly what the law required him to be. He turned back into his house. Loretta, he called. Staying calm in a crisis isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing your next word more carefully than your last breath. Research consistently shows that slow, deliberate speech lowers cortisol in both the speaker and the listener. Robert's composure wasn't just dignity. It was strategy. How do you stay calm when everything around you is falling apart? Tell us below. He heard it before he understood it. A sound like a door slamming, sharp, singular, wrong. And then the particular silence that follows something irreversible. The kind of silence that has a shape. The kind that fills a hallway from floor to ceiling and presses against the ears like water. Robert turned. Loretta was standing at the end of the hall. She had come out of the kitchen. She had been watching. Of course she had been watching. She had always been unable to leave a room, while something important was happening in the next one. It was the thing that had made her a brilliant woman and a frustrating wife, and the best person he had ever known. She was standing at the end of the hall with one hand raised slightly, as though she had been about to say something. Then she wasn't standing anymore. Robert moved. He did not decide to move. His body made the decision without consulting him, and he was across the hallway in 4 steps that he would never be able to remember taking. And he caught her before she reached the floor, barely, one knee coming down hard on the Persian runner, both arms finding her. His coffee still warm somewhere on the hall table, and the world still turning in the indifferent way the world turns. Outside, he heard footsteps running. Then a car door. Then another. Loretta. He said her name the way he had said it 10,000 times, across dinner tables, across courtroom parking lots, across 19 years of a life built inside these walls. He said it like a man who still believed in the power of words to compel a response. "Loretta, look at me." She looked at him. Her eyes were clear. That was the thing that would stay with him. That her eyes were completely clear, and that she recognized him, and that she was not afraid. She raised one hand and pressed it briefly against his face, the way she did when she was trying to tell him something she didn't have words for. Then her hand came down. Robert held her in the hallway of the home he had defended with every tool the law had given him. The home where the camera was still recording and the warrant was still wrong and the agents were already gone. Already in their vehicles, already rolling toward a version of tonight they would spend years trying to make legible. And the sirens Marcus Webb had promised arrived at the front gate and filled the street with light and sound, and the full institutional weight of justice arriving, as it so often does. At precisely the moment, it is no longer useful. The door was still open behind him. The porch light was on. The red camera light blinked steadily in the corner of the frame, recording the empty hallway, recording Robert on his knees, recording the absolute stillness of a man who had won every argument and lost the only verdict that mattered. He had known the law better than the people who wrote it. He had cited the right cases, held the right ground, made the right calls. And the system he had given his life to had walked through his front door on a Sunday morning with the wrong address and taken the one thing that had never belonged to it. The law won. Robert Fields knelt on the floor of his right home and held his wrong reality and did not make a sound. Nor this story is dedicated to everyone who has ever done everything right and still paid a price they didn't owe. If Robert's story hit you the way it hit us, share this with someone who needs to see it. Every like tells the algorithm this story matters. Every share puts it in front of someone who may need to know their rights before they need to use them. Subscribe for more stories like this one. And drop one word in the comments that describes how Robert's story made you feel. Just one word. We'll read every single one. Single.